Have you ever wondered if the fatigue, the hot flashes, the frozen shoulder, the joint pain, and the sleepless nights are all just a coincidence? It turns out it's not. If you are a woman nearing midlife, you are probably in perimenopause. And today on the podcast, we are talking to Jenn Pike. She is a wealth of knowledge on this shift of life for women, and she offers a lot of very practical tips and strategies that you can integrate to support your well-being through this transition. So today, I am very excited to extend a big, warm, wealthy welcome to our guest, Jenn Pike. Jenn is a functional hormone practitioner and educator, a registered holistic nutritionist, medical exercise specialist, and a certified yoga and Pilates instructor. In fact, that's where I first met Jenn, was on the yoga mat, and she's an amazing yoga instructor. She's also an author, a podcaster, and a powerful real-life, real-time inspiration to women who are seeking to take back control of their lives as they navigate middle age. Today, Jenn is going to take us on a deep dive into topics that are extremely important when it comes to women's health, hormonal health and healthy aging. And one of the best qualities about Jenn is she is on the path herself. So I've been following your Instagram page for a number of months, as well as your podcasts. And the great thing is that because of that platform and those platforms, women anywhere in the world can benefit from the science-backed strategies that you share and follow along as you apply them to your own life. Which I love that. So welcome to the Wealthy Podcast, Jenn.
Thanks for having me here. I'm excited for our chat today.
So we like to start with a bit of an opening tradition. Because most of the people that are sitting in that chair have a deeply held passion and interest in health. And I'm curious for you, when did that start? Like what is sort of your earliest memory around, an awareness or consciousness of what health is, maybe how it's impacted your life or those around you that you love?
Very, very young age. Like I can remember I was 6. And so I'm from Ontario originally. And in Toronto, there was the Fitness Institute that my dad was a member at. And my dad would take me there as a really young kid. And I would watch people exercising and athletes training. And I was just like, this is so amazing. And so from a really young age, that's how I was drawn into health. At the age of 9, I was put into like this kids kind of cardio movement program. And I loved it so much. One of the instructors asked if I wanted to teach the 2- and 3-year-olds. So I was 9 years old teaching my first group exercise class. And I just loved it. And then that was something that progressed. And by the time I was 14, I was going to the gym with my dad every day before high school started. And I knew by the age of 15, I was like, I am going to do something in this line of work because I just loved it so much. And simultaneously, being in health class as a girl and listening to what we were being taught and what was being told, my oldest sister was 12 years older than me. So I always say like when I was 4, she was 16. I was being exposed to a lot of very open conversations around menstrual health, around birth control, around all these different changes happening in the female body. And so it was just normal for me, like in my world that I grew up in. So when I would go and I would listen to some of the things that we were being taught in class, I was like, that is not the whole story. So we laugh about this as girlfriends now. In gym class in the change room after, I would be like, okay, so what we were just taught today, that's actually not how it is. And that's really where it started. By 17, I was teaching group exercise to the adults at the gym that I was a member at, and then went off to school. And when I went to school, I thought I was going to be a kin. I was going to go into kinesiology and physio. I spent like a hot second in that, and I was like, this is so boring. This is actually not what I want. I want to get in front of people getting here. And I knew I really wanted to work with women because I had, at the age of 17, I was at a yoga studio one day and this book fell. Literally, they had like a borrow a book, lend a book type of thing, literally fell off the shelf at my feet. I flip it over and it's called Taking Charge of Your Fertility. And I was not interested in my fertility at 17, but there was something about this book, and I opened it and I was just moving through it, and it was all about tracking your cycle. It was all about the different phases that we go through as women. And at 17, I remember reading this and thinking, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense, because at different points in the month, I was feeling like I was a different version of myself. And now I was reading information off paper that was telling me like, this is not in your head. This is actually a thing that we go through. And so at 17, I started to track and chart my cycle, literally on graph paper with a pencil. And I was also on the pill at that time. And it didn't sink into me to realize that being on the pill, I wasn't having a natural bleed every single month. And so tracking was kind of futile. But I did this. And then when I came off the pill at 22, I'd had this rhythm and understanding. And so that was kind of another leg of the journey. If I go back a little bit with when I thought I was going to go through and do physio, this transferred into becoming a medical exercise specialist. And I worked with all athletes, all male athletes, mainly NHLers. And it was awesome and it was fun. But I was also part-time personal training women, mainly mothers, where I grew up back home. And so I would train the athletes who had the whole team, the whole setup. Like they had the ecosystem, the chiro, the massage, the like everything, so they could perform their best. And then I would go and I would train these women and moms, and I was like, they don't have any support system. They're, working, they're raising kids, they're trying to carve out a few hours a week to take care of themselves. And I just remember thinking one day, these women are the everyday athletes of life, and I want to support them. And it became more fun working with the women and the guys, I was like, you're good. There's another, you don't need me to be there. And so that's really where I started to dial into women's health. And in doing the movement, I realized exercise was going to get us so far, but I really needed to dial in more and understand from nutrition. And going to school for medical exercise, you're not taught a lot. Like there's a little bit of information, but it's more about mechanics and physiology. It's not about fueling your body. And so that's when I went back to school in 2001, originally as a holistic nutritionist. I've since done more functional medicine training, and I'm now a functional medicine diagnostic nutritionist, which in English, what that means is now I use a lot of functional testing of stool, urine, hair, blood, saliva to really understand and decode the symptoms that people are experiencing, the struggles they're going through, to then make it more personalized and customized. So in all these years of doing this, I didn't have children yet. And so I was doing it through the lens of being this young 20-something, working with women that were in most cases twice my age. I was hearing them, but I wasn't getting them. When I had my first child, I was like, oh, yes. This is different. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I had this another kind of clicking moment, and a new passion woke up where I was like, I felt like I needed to go back and actually apologize to all those clients and say, I heard you, but I didn't understand you. And now I'm here, so I understand it. And so my career's gone through this evolution of, what I've gone through is what I grow through and what I teach. And so for a long time, I was doing peds and I was doing postpartum. And then as my children, I have 2 children now, got older, more of the women that were coming to me were displaying signs and symptoms of thyroid issues and autoimmune conditions. And they would come to me and say, I've had a full blood panel done and everything's fine. And I was like, well, do you feel fine? No, my hair is falling out. I'm cold all the time. I can't sleep. I'm constipated. I can't lose weight. I feel like I have heart palpitations that have come out of nowhere. And just the way they were describing themselves, I was like, okay, so let's actually do a full panel. Let's sit down and actually look at the results. And time again, we'd sit down, look at the chemistry of their own body, and things, in fact, were not fine. There was a lot of suboptimal issues that were happening, which unfortunately sometimes is that reference ranges in labs is like you have to be really low or really high. Like you have to be out of range where things are really flagged abnormal in order to get treatment. And for me, it was this energy of shifting the word from treatment to support. What if we could discover things happening in that suboptimal window? We could create an action plan and also connect you to your body. So instead of me just saying to you, I want you to eat this and not eat that. I want you to take these supplements and not that. What if instead of telling you, I taught you? So what if I explained to you the reason why this is so important? So I really come from this place of the why behind the what, because, and especially nowadays, I mean, we are in such an information overload time that we are desensitized to even being able to understand what's for us and what's not. So we've lost this ability to have discernment because we're just out of touch. Most people aren't connected to their bodies. And then when you wake up every day and you start and end your day on Instagram and TikTok and podcast and books and everything that are all incredible, but you are inundated with do this, don't do that. Eat this, don't eat that. Take this, don't do that. Fast this week, don't do that. Lift heavy, don't lift it. Like, it's so...
Egg yolks, no egg yolks.
Right. It's so confusing. And the reality is, at the end of the day, there's more than 8 billion humans on the planet right now. Okay. How can there possibly be one way, one system, one recommendation for every single human body? It's just not so. But we are looking for simplicity. So we want to have rules and a template, and we want it to be in a box, and we want to be able to just like check it off. And sometimes that can work. But when you're really trying to dial in and support a certain area of your body, hormonally, gut, inflammation, whatever it may be, that's when more specificity needs to happen. And that, for me, over the last 15 years of my career, that's where things have really dialed in. So I registered this company when I was 17. I'm going to be 45 in a few weeks. So it's been 27 years of really allowing myself to stay educated. I'm always back in school and programs, and I have an incredible faculty of mentors that are both from Western medicine, integrative, functional, Chinese medicine, because I've just learned that for every woman that I work with, she comes with an entire story and lineage that is going to require something slightly different than what research has taught me, or a study has proven, or data says. And that's one of the other things I think that I've enjoyed so much is, if we're always waiting for a study to come out, we're missing the opportunity of actually engaging with the human who's right in front of us, who is telling us, no, this is how I feel. And so that's where I think we have so much opportunity to really support people.
There's so much in there that I'm like, yes. Yeah. I want to unpack that on many levels. I think, though, one of the things that you said, just with regards to seeing the person in front of us, I've really become aware that, when you talk about those ranges, for example, when you go to the lab and you get your ranges or whatever, and it's sort of a range of normal, that it's based on population.
Exactly.
And I think this is what people really need to hear, is that it's based on population. But even if you are in that range, but you're not feeling well, it might not be optimal for you. So being on the low end of, an iron range might be okay for someone. But for me, perhaps it's not optimal.
Yep.
And I think that part of what we're trying to undo is this, I don't know, lack of awareness of what we're feeling, or trusting what we're feeling. We, not to get too sort of off the path of kind of medicine or functional integrated strategies towards health, but for example, yoga has been such a great tool for people to drop into their bodies once again. And I think you would probably agree that you are an exception. Most people are not as tuned into the language or the feedback that they're getting from their body. They just wake up in the morning, I'm tired and I feel like crap.
Right. And this is really ground zero is what I refer to this as, because what we're not connecting to, well, first of all, like movement is medicine, breath is medicine, nature is medicine, like all of these things that we're just so quick to outsource what's happening to everything that lives outside of us. And the reality is you will find some of the most powerful answers inside of you, but you have to actually slow down enough. And you used a word, trust. This is one of the biggest things that I teach all the women that we work with inside of all of our programs, whether it's health I'm supporting them on or it's their business, is you actually have to build a level of trust with your body, and you have to believe her the first time she communicates with you. Because we live in a time now where we're taught, I don't have time to listen to that. I got a headache, I got to take something to suppress it. I'm in pain, give me, an NSAID so I can get out of it. We're constantly, I'm feeling too much. What can I, drink or smoke or whatever it is so I can numb that so I don't have to feel that. And so there's the physical body, but that mental, emotional body is massive. And so when we get taught that 1 + 1 = this, which may be, like I said, an Advil or like a prescription, whatever it might be, or that things like yoga and going for a walk and taking a couple of deep breaths don't matter. Now we're in this point where we don't actually believe our body has the ability. We have to use something else. And so really trusting, and I always say to women, like, every day you wake up, your body has turned a page and is writing a new part of the story. And part of our job is to not just read like the lines, but what's in between the lines. And this is the powerful thing about conversation. When I'm working with a client, when I'm having a conversation with her and I'm doing a health intake, I hear what she's telling me, I'm taking that down, but I also feel what she's not telling me. And I hear what she's not telling me. And I read what her body language is saying. And so these are all the parts of us that we think, but that doesn't matter. Like, I just have really bad heartburn. Just make it go away.
Or
and
it's just always been like that. And
or that's my family.
I've
Everyone
accepted
has
it.
it.
Yeah.
Everyone has it, right? Or you wake up in the morning and you're tired. Well, is it because you had a crappy sleep, or is it because you're tired because you realized you're going back to a job that sucks the life out of you? Are you tired because you just spent the night sleeping next to someone you actually don't want to be in a relationship with anymore? Are you tired because before you went to bed, you looked at your bank statement and you realized you were in overdraft again? Are you tired because your kids are going through something and it might as well be you going through it because you are feeling it on that level? So it's understanding as well too that we are so much more than we realize, and all the parts. Like, this is really what holistic health is. Holistic health is not granola and kale. Okay? Holistic health is whole person, whole body, whole life. Everything that makes up who you are and what you do, that is the whole of who you are. And so if we want to have a holistic health approach for you and your body, I have to take into account all the pieces that make up who you are. That's where there can be this beautiful integration that sometimes medicine in its true form does not allow for, because there's not enough time, right? You can't divulge that information in a 7 or 8 minute session. And this is the hardest part about what I do for a living, is that oftentimes people think you have to choose one or the other. And it's actually the opposite of that. It's I do believe that you're going to need to have some private healthcare, meaning you're going to have to pay out of pocket to work with, whether it's a naturopath, a holistic practitioner, a functional medicine practitioner, whatever it may be. But they're part of bridging the education and the experience back to then when you're working with your primary care, your PCP, or you're going to see your endocrinologist or your OBG, whoever it may be. You actually are more resourced and educated now so that you know what to ask, how to ask it, and that you know the things to understand that in that short period of time, here's what your doctor is going to be able to provide you in that window. And then here's where you're going to have to go and build another support team. And so often, like, we want to blame the doctor and we want to blame the system. And granted, there could definitely be things that are improved. But you also have to understand that that doctor is seeing hundreds of people for that short period of time. They don't have like a secret society where they're like, let's just not help any of the patients coming in. Let's just like mess their lives up. They want to be able to offer and do that for you, but they are also under constraint of time. There's also scope of practice. It's interesting, like with my, regulatory bodies and what I do for a living, I have to go back to school every single year and do continuing education credits. There's a lot of professions where once you have your degree and your designation, you don't have to go back. You could choose to, but you don't have to. And so with our health, like the information, the science, it is changing all the time. So if we were having this conversation 10 years ago, it probably would have been a very different conversation, different information than the one we're having today. Because what we know today, I mean, even if you like talk about the human gut, like the microbiome, oh my gosh. And we've just barely begun to scratch the surface of that. So, for the individual, it's learning what you can in a period of time and then integrating it. So right now, when we're consumers of all the information, you have very little time to actually start to implement or integrate any of those tips. So what if you just slow down? And if the main thing for you right now is like, you've kind of lived a life where coffee is a meal.
We were just talking about this.
What if we could actually literally give you a meal? Like if that could be your one thing you started to do, was to start your day with something really nourishing to stabilize your blood sugar, to give fuel to your system, to get nutrients in. But that's the only thing you started to work on until that was now as common as you getting up and brushing your teeth. That's how we know that something has become a habit and a pattern. And then that's also how we know we're ready for more. Instead of Monday's coming, I'm just going to get rid of everything in the house. I'm going to start, and it lasts until like Wednesday. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And I do think that, people are, a lot of people are suffering. And so the media culture that we're living in right now is like these quick little, 1 minute, like, hey, you want to change your life? Just do this. Yeah. Hey, you want to change this? Just do this. It's compelling because we want that quick fix. But if I'm hearing what you're saying, it's that we have to be patient and we have to start to build a relationship with our bodies where we can actually hear the feedback we're being given.
Yeah.
And then start to find ways to address the headache or, the fatigue or whatever that are best for us, the individual, as opposed to just, take an Advil
or do this, quick, like you said, quick fix program and that. And so there's two things on that. So the first is we live in a world where it's about get your body will arrive in 30 days. It's kind of like the fitness version of Amazon.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like follow this 4-week plan and you're going to have, these results. And again, that is very attractive to people because all we want is to achieve the thing, but not to have to put a hard amount of work into it and have it take a long time. And so a mindset switch is, what about if we shifted from the 30-day body to the 30-year body? So instead of thinking of how you want to look in 30 days, how do you want to feel and function in 30 years? Right? So it's like every decision that we're making, and you will end up actually feeling the body and seeing the body changes happen that you want in the 30 days. It's just going to take a little bit more time. The other thing is like, oh my gosh, we spend so much time in our clinical practice and in our programs deconditioning and helping women to unlearn what they've been taught about their body. Because as you said, so many people are not doing well right now. And whether it's coming from the physical or it's the mental, emotional, it's the combination of all, there are a lot of people who are living in a state of chronic low-grade inflammation. And it's like having this slow leak. I say it's like, you've blown up the air mattress and on the surface, it looks like it's great. And, you're sleeping on it. And before you know it, you wake up at 2 a.m. and there's been this slow leak and you're literally on the floor. And that's how it feels for so many people.
How did I get here?
Exactly. And, women will say, I feel like I just woke up one morning and everything changed. And it's like, it doesn't actually work like that. There's been this slow brew of your body gives you signs and symptoms. So like the headaches are a normal part of human functioning. And if you're getting headaches chronically and all the time, you want to investigate that, right? We want to take a look at why. Why is your body producing this inflammatory response that's initiating and creating pain? It's a messenger. It's a microphone. It's like, hey, I need you to do something and shift something here. I'm at a balance. And that's why it's the same thing with like the bloating, the gas, the reflux, hair loss, acne. Like no matter what thing we're talking about, the thing that you are focused on is not the main thing, right? It's the messenger, it's the symptom, it's the signal, it's the flare that's being shot up into the sky. We got to get boots on the ground and actually start to understand, well, where are the roots of this? Because even right now when people talk about like root cause medicine, in my clinical experience of working with humans, and I don't have like a, PMID to tell you on this, like on PubMed, but in my experience working with humans, it's very rarely one thing. Right? So I refer to it as like the roots of what is going on. And the beautiful thing is when you start to work on one part of your health, that one seed you're planting has a ripple effect. So let's say it's the gas and the bloating, and you don't have great energy and you've got bad breath and you notice you have the headaches every now and again and you just feel groggy. By working on supporting optimal digestion and elimination, we think we're going after just the gas and the bloating, but guess what? When you're not gassy and bloated anymore and you're digesting your food and absorbing it better, your energy is going to improve. The, halitosis is going to go away. The sleep is going to improve. The skin is going to improve. The headaches are going to dissipate. So you don't look at it like I have 9 things I have to work on. It's like, no, let's start with this one thing and you will get, a 9-limb benefit from doing that one thing.
I love that. I love that we're starting here. I have a plan when we come to these podcasts and I'm like, oh, we're going to talk about perimenopause. Yeah. But like, it's so good and refreshing to actually like go back and start at the beginning, which is first we have to meet ourselves there in order to start to unravel kind of what may be causing the symptoms. We have to start to build that relationship with ourselves and understand that this is a process that takes time and investigation and be curious. And also it's not going to be fixed with just one thing.
Right.
And I think that's where maybe we've gotten ourselves in a little bit of hot water in the current modality, right? Where it's like, oh, if I just do this and if I take this pill, then all of my problems are going to be solved. Right. And that's most of the time not the case. And then when we start talking about prevention, how can we get to a place where maybe we don't need the pill anymore, regardless of what that pill is for?
Or if we do need the pill, the medication, then we're doing other things in our lifestyle that are helping our body better utilize the purpose of the pill, right? Thyroid's a great example of that. It's like we can't just give people, Synthroid level thyroxine, which is only T4, and then be like, and now all of your thyroid symptoms are going to be gone. They will probably feel more stable and feel better. But, there's a conversion issue that needs to be addressed. There's a signaling issue and their lifestyle. So it's like if you were to improve your nutrition, you were to get more regular movement, improve your sleep habits and hygiene, get more hydrated. Oh my gosh, all of those things would now assist in that medication doing a better job in your body versus just taking the pill and being like, well, now like that's it. I don't have to do anything.
So I feel like I want to ask you specifically, about hormones, because this is an area of expertise, I think, for you.
Yeah.
And you have been very outspoken, I think, in a really good way about the conversation around, or the lack of conversation, I guess, up until recently around the change of life that happens in our midlife for women.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about, my daughter's 16 when she was going through that time of puberty, like they had classes on it, what to expect, how to navigate that, how to support yourself through that. Prenatal, like pregnancy, lots of support. Yeah. We can probably get into a whole nother topic about postnatal.
Yes.
Probably not there yet.
No.
But and then even worse is perimenopause or menopause.
Yeah.
So let's start there. I hear menopause, perimenopause, pre-perimenopause. What's the distinction?
Yeah. So it's a great question. And, you also just mentioned puberty there. And what I will say is, so puberty for tweens and teens as they're coming into it is all the hormones coming online, right? It's when you have like the richest amount of estrogen that's coming online. And then, you start to ovulate. Now you have progesterone on the scene and DHEA from the adrenals is high and testosterone is like everything. And this is why we notice all the changes in our daughters. Like my oldest daughter is 18. Is like the shape of their body changes. They start to develop breasts. Their, body odor changes, all these different things. So these are the hormones all coming on. Their mood can be all over, it will be. Their mood will be all over the place.
Verified.
Yeah, facts. Perimenopause is our second puberty that we go through that never gets talked about. So menopause and perimenopause oftentimes get used interchangeably. They are not the same thing. Perimenopause is on average about an 8 to 12 year journey. So let's just call it a decade journey from somewhere in our mid to late 30s all the way through until we actually go a full 12 months on the calendar with no bleed, which is then the definition of menopause. So menopause is one day. Okay. Everything after that one day is now postmenopause. And as women, the average woman now, when we look at life expectancy, will live the last third of her life in a postmenopausal state. That is significant, okay? In perimenopause, this is the runway. This is when we start to have a systemic uncoupling from not just a reproductive perspective. So we hyper-focus on estrogen and progesterone and the actual period as being the main events of perimenopause. They're not. They're the byproduct of what happens in perimenopause. Perimenopause starts in the brain. So the conversation to the ovaries is actually starting upstream in the brain. The pituitary gland, which is producing hormones, follicular stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormones, also where TSH is produced in that part of the brain. This is the signaling mechanism. And for FSH and LH, the brain is essentially screaming down to the ovaries, this is now your job, batter up. You now need to ripen all these follicles on the ovaries, choose a dominant follicle that is then going to be the golden one that's going to produce the golden egg, go through ovulation, produce this rich, new, abundant source of progesterone. And, that is like the first and second phase of the cycle. That third phase of the cycle, which is known as the luteal phase, this is when we have this, abundancy of progesterone. Estrogen will start to pick up a little bit again. And when we're primed to actually become pregnant, right? So if we don't fertilize an egg, if we're not pregnant, the body gets the hormonal cues that is not what has happened. Estrogen and progesterone now both drop off. The signals to the endometrium, which is the lining of the uterus, to shed. Okay, that's the whole system. Then you get your period. So your cycle and your period aren't the same thing. Your period is when you bleed. Your cycle is the whole length of all the events happening. So from day one of your bleed all the way through until you get your next bleed, that's your cycle. So how women will explain this is, I have a 28-day cycle, I have a 5-day period. That's the difference. In perimenopause, you don't have this predictability. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not always the case in some women. I would say more women than not now, where the changes in the period are oftentimes the last thing that happens. Mm-hmm. So they'll start to notice things as early as the age 35, 36. More common right now, I would say, in our practices between the ages of 38 and 40, where they will say things like, I used to get a little bit of PMS, but I am ragey now before my period, or I am crying for what feels like no reason. I have heart palpitations. I have vertigo that I've never had before. My eyes are so dry. Everything starts to dry up and dry out. So literally, it's like Sahara Desert. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of women, this is a sign and symptom that estrogen is starting to leave the building, right? So we produce estrogen in a few different ways, but primarily for us, it is in the ovaries. We have something called aromatization that happens from testosterone that gets converted to estrogen, and that our ovaries are producing estradiol E2. As we start to get older, we start to lose the rich, abundant, regular production of estrogen. We're not ovulating every single month anymore. So as a woman, you can still have a period, but it doesn't mean you ovulated. And these are called anovulatory cycles. And so the reason that this happens is that the signaling, again, from the brain, the body knows, we are not meant to actually have a period and be in a reproductive state for the entirety of our life. We typically will get, a couple, usually about 3 solid decades of that period of time. So between the ages of 10 and 50, 3 to 4 decades. Average median age of actual menopause, where the period stops fully, is around 51. But it can be different. I have some women who go into what's called premature ovarian insufficiency, POI. They're in full-blown menopause at the age of 40, 41. That's considered early. Mm-hmm. I have women in my practice who are 57 and 58 and have a more regular cycle than I do at almost 45. Mm-hmm. So there is no one way it's going to happen. When I first started researching and teaching about perimenopause, when you would look up studies and research and data, there was about 30 symptoms associated with perimenopause. There's 103 right now.
Wow.
So there's so many things that we used to say, well, no, this is like a mental health issue for women,
right? Yeah.
Right? Because one of the big prongs that women were recommended when they would go to the doctor and say, I cannot sleep. I am waking up constantly in the middle of the night. I have no energy. I am gaining weight. I have heart palpitations. My mood is all over the place. Oftentimes antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication is what would be recommended. The woman who had the irregular period changes happening, had heavier periods, had spotting that were happening, she was recommended the pill. And so women have had a lot of these symptoms for a very long time, but it was not associated because perimenopause wasn't something that was ever studied.
Right.
It has only just started to become researched in the last literally 12 months on a big level. And this is because of the menopause that's out in the world, the Dr. Mary Claire Havers, Dr. Vonda Wright, a lot of the, Dr. Lisa Moscone, who wrote The Menopause Brain. So we're looking at things now finally, like it's wild. You look back at the last 100 years of research in women's health, women were barely even in the research about women's health. What? So it's, we've been just kind of looked at like we're crazy when we're going through these symptoms, when in fact, these are all natural progressions of this uncoupling that is happening. And so perimenopause will impact everything from our mental health and well-being, our neurocognitive function, being able to like, what is that thing that I've always known at the tip of my tongue? Being able to show up and focus, being able to stay task-oriented, our bone health, our breast health, our heart health. So it's understanding that the role of these reproductive hormones, specifically estrogen in this case, is we have estrogen receptors literally throughout our entire body. And so when we talk about and treat something like estrogen just being like, well, when your period ends, like you're not going to get pregnant anymore, so it doesn't matter if you don't have those hormones, just move through it naturally. We're not here arguing about why we need estrogen replacement therapy for women or why we need more research and support so they can get their period back. It's because their heart and cardiovascular system is dependent on it, and that's the number one killer of women. It's because insulin sensitivity is on the rise and leptin resistance, and if we don't have those estrogen receptors in alignment, that becomes a bigger issue. Now we have more women that are pre-diabetic, dementia, which is type 3 diabetes, Alzheimer's, all osteoporosis, breast cancer, all of these different things we're talking about. We could be playing a big role in prevention of a lot of these issues ever reaching women by understanding the lifestyle to help them to start to adopt, by even before that, teaching them this is what's going to happen. These are the signs and symptoms to pay attention to. These are some of the things to start to, do and strategize in your life. And then knowing, okay, now when you go to your provider, what it is that you are going to ask for testing wise, understand, and all of those things. So perimenopause is this really incredible window of time as a woman where we really get to learn the most about our bodies that we probably ever will outside of when we go into puberty. And it's setting us up so that when we're in that postmenopausal state, we already know the daily things of keeping stable blood sugar, optimizing digestion, supporting, our lymph system through exercise and movement, non-negotiable sleep, creating boundaries for ourselves energetically and literally in our life, using our voice, all of these different things, understanding the nutrients that we need at that time in our life, because it's going to be very different what you need in your 40s and 50s versus what you needed in your 20s. And knowing that our body's not on the same timeline. So you could go and party for however long in your 20s and just clean things up for a few days, and then the bloat would be gone. You'd be back down to your, your weight, and your body would feel fine. You try and pull that same stint when you're in your 40s and in your 50s. Absolutely not. Your body's like, I am not having it.
Thanks.
Yeah. And it'll take you, X amount of time to get back. So, it's important to understand perimenopause is not menopause. It's also really important to understand your mother's menopause does not need to be your menopause.
Yes.
That's really important to understand. And that if you feel like you're not getting anywhere with your provider, this to me is like interviewing for a job. Like if you don't feel like you have the right candidate in front of you, it is up to you to take that radical responsibility and go find someone who you feel like is listening to you, is teaching you. And that's the tricky part we are at right now, especially in Canada, is because we are under this guise that we have free healthcare. It's very difficult for women to understand why they're going to need to pay out of pocket to have appropriate support moving through this time in their life. And so, it's like in our company, even this podcast, these are all like free points of education information. But when it comes down to it, you do need to work with a provider so you can get potentially a prescription, that you can have the necessary tests that are run. That's where, we teach so much in our society about having a registered retirement savings account. It's like, why aren't we teaching more people about a health spending account?
I love that. And I think that there, again, we spend our money on a lot of things.
We do.
But there's this assumption, and we come up against this all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why the foundation exists, is because there just isn't enough funding for the need for healthcare in Canada. But to your point, you know, our quality of life and our longevity. When you're healthy, you don't think too much about, oh, what am I going to need for healthcare?
Right.
You know, but as soon as that becomes an issue, it's all you think about, right?
Yeah.
And so why wouldn't we, you know, we invest, I mean, a lot of money in vehicles, cars, right? In stuff for our homes, in vacations, like beyond sort of the basic necessities of life. Why wouldn't we put, just the reality is that we may have to seek outside support for these things.
Yeah.
Put money aside for that. Isn't that the most important? I mean, this whole podcast is based on the premise that health is everything.
But we have to, again, we understand this. But when you look outside of an environment like this and you look at what is in media and what the total opposite example is out there, we live in a world of consumerism. You need to own this. You need to buy that. If you have this, it'll make your life better. And so even in the health space, I will always say to people, before you go and just buy the random supplement that is being talked about on the #1 podcast right now, before you go and buy the red light, all these things, I love them. I love them all in that. Before you go invest in, you know, the sauna or the this and that and the other, it's like, circle back around and let's just ask yourself a couple key things about what you're doing every day. Do you get any fresh air and natural light? Are you getting to bed at a decent time? Are you eating, you know, the least amount of processed food possible and getting good quality nutrients in? Are you drinking filtered water, right? Or water in general? Like all these small basic things that we're like, but that's not sexy. That doesn't come with a promise of it happening quickly. You know, I just recorded a podcast the other week, right when Amazon Prime ended that 48-hour sale. And it's like in one, and I understand, right? Like I'm a Canadian living here as well too. I understand the cost of living has definitely gone up. You know, my husband and I are entrepreneurs. We don't have like, you know, there's no pension, there's no all of that. We've created that. We have created those self-sustaining funds for ourselves. So I do understand when people are saying it costs now more to go buy my groceries, to do all this and that. But when you simply look at the statistics of how much as a society we are still spending on stuff and things, like we get one body. It's not like when you have a 4-year car lease and you get to go trade it in. You get one. You don't have bodies hanging up in the closet, right? But you can't. Like we're not the Avengers.
No.
We don't get to unzip and go into the closet and be like, this body's feeling a little shabby and crappy today. I'm going to go put a new one on. We get one. So it is, and people are like, oh, it's so much work. Change your mindset. It is a responsibility. Like you've been given this gift of a body. The fact of even like being here is massive. And it's the same thing if you were witnessing your children on a path where they were not taking care of themselves and they were doing things that you could see, like they were sick all the time. They were not getting proper sleep. They had bags under their eyes. They were you would not just sit back and be like, and them's just the cards. Like that's just the way the deck fell. You would try and do things. You have to be willing to do that for yourself. And so it's hard. It's really hard. It's really hard too if you don't have any of those support mechanisms around you. Like if you, the individual, I mean, I was like the purple duck in a yellow duck world forever. I was the weird one bringing, you know, like a wrap or salad to school when everyone was getting the cafeteria poutine with the pump cheese. I was weird, right, for doing that. I was weird for bringing water to school and not going and getting a pop out of the vending machine. But it was this knowing of like, I understand the long game of this. And I also just really valued how I wanted to feel. So if we want to create big impact in the world, if we want to have lots of quality time with our family and friends, like it's really hard to do that when you're not feeling well. And for women in perimenopause, one of the big things that I love about this phase that happens is women get to this point where their BS meter gets a whole lot shorter. So like they could tolerate this much and now it's like this much. And so what that does is it puts you in this seat of you got to make sharp decisions a little bit quicker because you just don't have that same bandwidth. And it is a time in life. You know, we talk about like the shedding of the lining of the uterus is like, this is your, one of the phases of your body's detoxification that only women have. This is a superpower our body has. Well, when you're getting into a time where your body is literally starting to let go of an entire system, right? Reproductive system that you have had that cycle for all that period of time, what else needs to go with it? Because you are not going to be the same version of yourself as you're moving through it, and you most definitely won't be on the other side. And it's really interesting when you research, You try and find information about perimenopause and menopause in other cultures around the world. You try and find information about PMS. They don't even have a name for it because it's not a thing there. These women are revered as becoming the crone, the wise woman, the medicine woman, like, the healers of the tribe, of the community, of the village. And so it is something that is celebrated. And she does not have the same intensity of the signs and symptoms that the industrialized, revolutionary woman of North America and other countries have. So it's another question we have to ask ourselves, is the pace and kind of life we're living that is this slow leak, right? It's like some people say, oh my God, I'm so stressed all the time, and they can identify the stress. And other women you talk to will say, I feel so stressed and I don't know why. And then you start to spend time with them and pull it apart, and then they're like, oh, okay, now it's landing. So when a body is in a stressed out state and now we have something that happens and we don't have all our resources, it's like you said, when you're healthy, you don't think about these things. But when you're unwell, it's like there's maximum tension. The body's like, I got you, I got you, I got you. I don't got you anymore. And so what we want to do is treat our body in this way where we're just like support. Okay, we may hit some roadblocks of symptoms and struggles, but we've got the foundation. Now anything we bring into the body is like, okay, I can kind of upgrade how you're feeling based on that.
So if I am listening to this podcast and maybe in that perimenopausal window phase, which is long.
It is. And it's important, I think, for women to understand. I just want to say this too. You could have no changes happening in your period and still be in perimenopause.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about that. What does the slow leak look like?
The slow leak is some of the things I said, like increase in moodiness coming into the week before your period, new signs and symptoms you didn't used to have before. So the period could start to get heavier. You could have a little bit of spotting a day or two before your period, where it's not a period, but when you wipe, there's a tinge that's there. You may have to use a panty liner. You just notice that the way that you, like if you're a woman that described yourself as type A personality, taskmaster, like productive, all of those things, and you used to love doing multiple things, now you start to resent all the things that you've actually said yes to, and you don't have the ability to stay on top of it. You might notice that this is a big one. Sleep. Sleep is a big one. Vaginal dryness, painful intercourse, libido has really gone down, and libido is like a whole conversation in and of itself because it's so multifaceted. It's not just about hormones declining. It's about literally like desire in life as a whole. Hair thinning and texture changing, skin changes happening, digestive system that used to be fine. All of a sudden you're like, I have all these food sensitivities I never used to have before. Joint pain, inflammation, brain fog. There's a whole slew of things that can happen.
I even heard like frozen shoulder.
Yeah. And there was the most incredible research study that was published yesterday by Dr. Vonda Wright and her team. If you go to my Instagram, I have it linked up there. So more than 70% of women will suffer from musculoskeletal systems. 25% of them will actually become crippled as a result of this. And so this again comes back to talking about bone health, lack of muscle. As women, it's really non-negotiable for us to be putting a daily deposit of muscle onto our body. Muscle is an organ of longevity. Muscle also has incredible support for our endocrine function, but we need to have more muscle on our frame so that when we have this decline of hormones, we have the strength, the coordination, the stability. We can prevent ourselves from falling. And if we do fall, we have the resources to recover better from that. And when they say 25% of those women will end up disabled, when you look at the 25%, an alarming amount come from hip fractures from women who fall, and a huge amount of them that actually die. When you look at the amount of women who suffer from genitourinary symptoms, bacterial vaginosis, urinary tract infections, yeast infections, chronic infections involving the bladder, urethra, and the uterus in and of itself. The amount of women who will die from chronic UTIs because what they're given is prescriptions over and over again and not given vaginal estrogen as part of the support. So we have a gut microbiome we've done tons of research on. We also have a vaginal microbiome. We have a skin microbiome. We have an oral microbiome. We are discovering new things all the time. So again, if we just hear a woman's surface complaints and we're just like, oh, you have a bladder infection, we saw these levels in your differentials, or frozen shoulder. Frozen shoulder, you're going to do physio, and in 18 months it'll alleviate itself.
Or plantar fasciitis, I heard that too.
Plantar fasciitis, tendinitis, there's all different issues that show up. TMJ for women as well. a lot of increased issues with SI and sacral, problems as well. So like hinging and moving through hip and pelvic mobility changes. And this is specifically due to the decrease in estradiol.
Great. Yeah. So that was what I wanted to clarify. It's the decrease in estradiol, which is
estrogen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
that is causing these symptoms or manifestations that we can feel.
Yes.
But you kind of mentioned bone density loss.
Yeah.
So what about the things that you might not know are happening that we should know about, like this like when estrogen drops, this loss of bone density or the cardiac implications.
So this is again like paying attention to your body, having regular checkups, which again, it's like, we talked about the fact you could be going to your primary care practitioner, getting what you think is complete labs, but no one's calling you back about it. No one's explaining what's going on. No one's saying, it's okay, but it's a bit of a yellow flag. And these are things you want to implement.
Or the labs look fine.
But fine is suboptimal.
Yes.
And also there's things that are happening in our blood that if it's happening on a cellular level, we won't necessarily see it in the blood yet. And thyroid is a prime example of this, right? So it happens within the mitochondrial health of the cell, which we can't test in serum until it gets bad enough. So it's also, again, working with somebody who can understand that. When we talk about the early signs of heart disease and we talk about bone health and all of that, this is things like you're stiff and sore all the time. You're losing your range of motion and mobility. Your ability to bend down and get back up is not the same as it used to be. And this is why exercise is so important. So instead of focusing on exercise to lose weight, focus on exercise to build muscle, stay mobile, and stay strong and stable. Those are the core tenets of why we exercise and work out. We want to have time under tension for our body. And so even when we look at things like frozen shoulder in women, it's like if we were to be able to support them with estrogen replacement therapy, make sure that they're also eating a diet that's rich in phytoestrogens and omega-3 so that they're getting that healthy lubrication. But estrogen itself plays a role in the tensile and structural strength of the ligaments and the tendons. And when we do not have that, we're more prone to injury and we're more prone to these musculoskeletal issues that are happening. So, it's incredible research that's coming out. Hopefully it'll, motivate more women to get into the gym, to get into yoga, to move their body, to not be afraid to lift heavier weights.
So you talked a little bit about how we have to change the way we think. I'm a little bit older than you, but I think we sort of both probably grew up in that time, that era where it was like cardio, right? If you want to lose weight, you got to do cardio. Yeah. And certainly one of the perimenopausal symptoms that I have noticed is that my body composition has changed.
Yeah.
And it's bothersome.
Yes.
And so I'm like, I would like to get rid of this little.
And it's typically around the waist for
most
women.
Exactly. So like, but there's also this concern that if you lift heavy weights, you're gonna get bigger. You're gonna.
Those
I mean, I know it's kind of cool now to have a big bum, but
we pray to get bigger. Like I have been seriously strength training for 30 years. Yeah. I can curl and press. Like it shocks people what I can lift because they look at my giraffe limbs and they're like, where is it? That is a fallacy that women are going to get bulky. The only way someone will get bulky if they're starting to lift heavier weights is if you're eating a really unhealthy diet, you are in a caloric surplus and you're lifting those weights.
So that's not happening. Fat and muscle.
It's not like, and to build muscle, like it takes years to put on pounds of muscle. A newbie in the beginning is going to have what's called newbie gains, and they're going to be able to put on a little bit quicker. For the person who's already been healthy, fit, and exercising, it takes a very dialed in strategy to achieve that. And so
the good news is that if you're coming to this conversation and you're not strength training, that you don't really have to kind of worry too much about the bulky myth.
1% do you have to worry about that. And here's the thing is we've been taught that the word tone is the desire.
Right.
Tone is part of how we describe what's happening in the nervous system. Okay. tone in a muscle, if you see someone with toned legs or toned arms, they have muscle, which is giving the appearance of it being toned. Cardio will never help a woman achieve body recomposition. Body recomp means you are losing fat and you are building muscle. In perimenopause, this is the number one goal. And how do we do that? Well, part of it is having an appropriate strength training regime. You're not going to get this from having a yoga-only approach. Does that mean you don't want to do yoga? Absolutely not. You'd bring the yoga in to accessorize that. But for the woman who is like, I'm gaining weight, it's mostly around my waist, I've changed nothing, and yet I am up 10 pounds on the scale and I can't wear the same pants I could a few months ago.
Which is a very common experience, I think.
The most common. Cardio is not going to be the thing. And so when we look at cardio, in the beginning, it would be having this woman do what's called LISS or MISS, which is low intensity steady state or moderate intensity steady state. Walk, get outside and walk, work on getting steps in as opposed to, heavy Peloton classes. And the thing that just drives me mental right now is with the Apple Watches and closing the circles. I'm like, you women get frustrated because if they don't see the data on the device say that they've worked hard enough, then they've not worked hard enough. And so
I just have to say, I literally just had this internal conversation with myself last night when my watch died and I was about to head out on a walk with my husband, and I was like, I need to charge my watch so that I can track my walk. And then I was like, why am I doing this? Yeah. Am I a slave to the, like, why don't I just walk?
Yeah. And this is it. But again, so we actually don't think we have self-control, willpower, any of these things. We do,
we need to track it.
Exactly. We need to see evidence.
And also there's this underwritten same thing. Calories in, calories out. Like, oh, I had the cookie after dinner. Yeah. I'm going to go for a walk and get rid of the cookie.
Yeah. We could do literally a whole podcast around like muscle building and fat loss science specific to women.
So tell me about the cardio piece though, because I think this is super important for those of us that grew up in that era where we're like, sweat it out, baby.
Yeah. Probably the worst approach you could take in perimenopause, because your adrenals and your thyroid are also moving into an insufficient state of health and well-being. And the more you tax that system, and are you going to burn more calories with cardio than you might strength training? You might. But strength training is what is helping you to build muscle. Muscle is calorically denser in terms of the metabolic stimulation. Muscle is a sponge for excess insulin. Women, as they go into perimenopause and menopause, will naturally, without changing anything, become more insulin sensitive. What does that mean? Your body does not manage glucose and insulin the same way it used to.
You get a paunch.
You get a belly.
Yeah.
You get an inflammatory little belly and some new rolls where you're like, what is actually happening? I did not eat to earn this. I have been doing the opposite.
No fair.
And so what women will do is they'll increase the cardio to burn more calories. They will put themselves into a caloric deficit. They will overfast. So they do all of these deficitary actions, and then they get even more frustrated because it's not working. So what are you going to do now if you are doing 12,000 steps a day or you're trying to burn X amount of calories? You're already condensing your eating window to 6 to 8 hours a day. You're already eating 1,200 calories or less a day. You've cut out your carbohydrate. What is next? What do you actually have?
Left.
You have nothing left. For most women, what it is you have to actually start to learn how to begin to eat at what your maintenance should be. Getting enough protein, enough fat, enough carbohydrates. Fiber for women in perimenopause is huge because this also helps support insulin regulation and binds to excess estrogen the body's trying to detox. Protein for women, hardest macronutrient to get in. Most women think that if they have yogurt, cheese, nuts, and peanut butter, they're hitting their protein. What they're hitting is fat. And listen, this is coming from somebody who lived with a spoon in an almond butter jar for many years when I was building my company and had small kids, because that fat is satiating, right? But when we're looking at it, 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. 1 gram of a carbohydrate is 4 calories. We've demonized carbohydrates and we have, moved fats like they're Olympic gold medalists to the top. They're very important, but mark my words, when you are trying to change your body composition and lose your belly fat, protein is the star of the show. Carbohydrates come in secondary and fat is actually the third factor. So for women in the beginning, can you start to think about getting in roughly 100 to 120 grams of protein every single day? It's about 30-ish grams per meal, 30 to 40. And, there's lots of different ways that you can be doing that, but it's not going to come from 2 eggs. 2 eggs is 12 grams of protein. It's not enough. And so part of this is also teaching women what healthy eating looks like. and making sure that calorically that you are getting enough. When you start to bring your body into this maintenance level of calories and now your body is fed, what oftentimes happens is women will lose weight when they're actually eating enough. Then you
Which
get
is
to
so
this
counterintuitive, right?
It's counterintuitive, but it's exactly by design in the body.
Yes.
Your body, in order to lose weight, to do all of these things, to have healthy ovulation in a cycle, has to feel safe. If you are constantly in a deprived deficit state, your body does not feel safe. This is a low leak behind the scenes. This is adrenal dysregulation. This is hypoglycemia that's going to start to happen. This is you needing another cup of coffee. This is you always needing a little piece of chocolate. This is you needing to have the glass of wine at the end of the day. Right? So it's like, again, we start to peel back these layers. In the beginning for women, there's just a lot you have to like, you hear it and you're like, oh my gosh, that's me. I do that.
Totally.
Now what? So we clear that off the table and it's like, okay, cool. We've realized we're all the same. It's like, you're not special. Every woman is the same, trying to do it the same way because we've all been taught that way as a society. We have been marketed to brilliantly, but we have also been very misled. So now we're in a time where there's new education coming out and we're trying to catch up to it, but we're still trying to get the body in 30 days.
Oh, and it's really hard to undo that old thinking.
100% it is because
I
we've
still,
been
I
made
hear
to
you,
terrify
but I still
it.
don't.
You still
trying
don't
to believe
me.
you.
I know, I get it.
I really am, but I'm just being honest because
Yeah.
like I think I'm not alone in this. Is like we hear this, but yet I'm like it's really hard to undo.
Yeah, I get it.
That thinking that's been there for decades.
Yep. Yeah, it's still there. It's just packaged in a slightly different way.
But I still want to go on my Peloton.
You can't. But here's the thing: you can still go on your Peloton, but not 5, 6, and 7 days a week,
right.
And that's not your main source of it. So it's also, and again, this is where working with someone or going into a program or whatever, where you learn the appropriate application. And then the other side of that is that if you want to be doing your Peloton, it's teaching you nutrient timing of what to eat before and after that workout, so you maximize your benefits instead of getting diminishing returns.
And getting into that stress response that you
100%. I see this in teaching hot yoga all the time. The amount of time I've seen students actually pass out because the heat is a lot. They came fasted. They came caffeinated and fasted. They had no electrolytes in their water, and they're trying to go as hard as they possibly can. And I've been in the fitness industry, as I said, for, since I was 6. So I've seen a lot. I owned a studio and a gym for a period of time. And this is what people will do is they will fast, but they'll caffeinate. They'll get to the exercise, they'll do the workout, they'll fast longer because they want to extend the caloric burn and the deficit. And then they're ravenous and they're not necessarily going to go and have the healthiest thing. They're going to go get something quick that's going to pick them up, give them a hit of dopamine. And this is just the repetitive cycle that we get stuck in, where it's like I said, I think 3 days ago when we started talking was... If you could start simply by grounding your day with an awesome breakfast in the morning.
Okay.
And stabilize your blood sugar. Aim to get the 30.
What's an awesome breakfast?
Honestly, any kind of bowl. Like take your leftovers from the night before. A common breakfast for me is like if
Wait, what? Like a dinner from night before?
Yeah, because we have to stop like breakfast, lunch, dinner. It's just food.
Okay.
So you're going to have a great meal in the morning.
Okay.
So oftentimes, like this morning, I had a bunch of leftover roasted veggies. I threw some arugula into a bowl. I drizzled olive oil on top of that. I threw the roasted veg on there. I had chicken that was left over from last night. That was my breakfast. That was a really easy way.
You're blowing my mind right now.
That was a really, see, we think of, but again, we've been marketing and Kellogg's and Quaker are actually the companies behind this has told you that breakfast is something that has like oats or toast or bread, or it's a couple of eggs. And we can work with those things to also help you build out how to have the appropriate, protein. But then in things like smoothies, a lot of smoothies people are having, it's like, okay, you might get 30 grams of protein, but you're getting like 70 grams of sugar in there from the other things that we're adding. So looking at, again, it's not about meal prep, it's food prep. So when we are making chicken breast in our house, there's 4 of us. We don't make 4 chicken breasts. We literally make 12. Because now we have them in the fridge in a Corningware dish to use up for a quick meal that night, lunches the next day, breakfast, whatever it may be. If I'm going to turn the oven on, I am not roasting 1 tray of vegetables. I'm going to roast 2 or 3. So now I have them ready to go. So it's things like that. If you're somebody that you're a shift worker you have like a schedule that's kind of unpredictable. When you're making one smoothie, why aren't you making two? Are you going to lose a little bit of the nutrients from it sitting there, for X amount of hours, or maybe making it night in the morning? Sure. But I'd rather you drink something that has 30% less nutrients than not getting it and not getting 100% of the nutrients.
Right.
So this is, again, how we can create simplicity. We've been led to believe that it is so much harder than it has to be. And it just isn't that way. So it's like, you got to follow the people who essentially are like knocking down the walls, the rules built up in the first place. Because then you're just like, oh, this is actually way easier doing it this way.
So, okay. So let's add two more. So if there's 3 things that women can do today after listening to this podcast to help them extend their well-being and support themselves through a perimenopausal or even menopausal phase of life. Okay, so we're going to start with the simple thing. We're going to have breakfast.
Yeah, you're going to stabilize your blood sugar. That's like
nutrition.
Ground zero. Okay. Stable blood sugar. If you have stable blood sugar, it's going to help literally 1 million other things that's going on.
Okay, then what are the 2 other?
You got to move your body.
Okay.
You need to move your body. You need to ask yourself, what do you like to do? You need to find community or find someone else who's already like a little bit further along in the journey with you that can be an accountability, buddy or partner. Go and do that for yourself. You have to stop negotiating your sleep. Okay. And this is really hard for women because they're like, thank you, Captain Obvious. I know I need to sleep, but I can't. I lie down, my mind is racing, or I fall asleep. But very commonly in perimenopause, waking between like 2 and 4 in the morning, which this right here is a deep sign of unstable blood sugar, right? Some insulin resistance, cortisol issues, and potentially we need to be looking at hormone replacement therapy. Progesterone will help you fall asleep. Estrogen helps you stay asleep. But estrogen, cortisol, and insulin are all in like a triad together of supporting one another. So we know if one is out of balance, it's pulling a string on one of the others in that system. So getting to bed. Get to bed earlier. If you can start to have a regular rest schedule. So I say rest because maybe you get into bed at 10 o'clock and you can't fall asleep just yet, but you are like lying down. You're off blue light. You're not on your phone. This is hard for people because they're on their phone, they're on their iPad, they're on a Kindle, even something that's like you're reading a book, but it's that exposure keeps cortisol elevated and shunts melatonin production. So can you start to optimize rest? Get to bed earlier. This is going to be a big one. And then what is also really important is that in amongst this blood sugar stabilizing, your movement and getting better rest is you really have to evaluate the nutrients your body needs. Adding something as simple as magnesium in for women can be huge. There's a lot of different forms of magnesium. I like a magnesium bisglycinate. I find it's really easily absorbed. For the woman who's constipated, I may add in some citrate to help to get things moving. Omega-3s are really important. Methylated B vitamins are really important. A good quality probiotic for most women, especially if the gut is a source of inflammation, and vitamin D. Those are going to be kind of like your general nutrients to bring into your body. And then this is where you could work with somebody that if you're getting hot flashes and night sweats and some of those different symptoms, then it is really starting to create something that's customized and bringing it in. But like this study we talked about with the musculoskeletal symptoms, vitamin D and magnesium, and the K, right? Critically important to one another. No one's talking about the calcium. And this is the other thing we've shifted away from is we're not giving calcium supplementation to women for the most part, unless we're seeing something in their labs that is requiring that. It is the connection between magnesium and mineral-rich foods and supplements and the vitamin D.
It's fascinating. And there are so many questions, like pretty much all the questions that I prepared, we didn't even get to, but that's okay because I really appreciate you are so knowledgeable on this particular area. And as has been demonstrated, an hour conversation can barely scratch the surface of the complexity of all of these things. But what I love about your platform and your view on all of this is the simplicity. It's complicated, but it's not, right? And I think if people are curious about longevity and navigating perimenopause with grace and as little discomfort as possible. You offer some really great strategies that people can integrate into their lives right after they finish listening to this. So I really appreciate that. Before we wrap up, because I have you in the hot seat, I'm going to ask you, this podcast is all about kind of like that holistic view of health, and that all aspects of our lives have an impact on our health. And in that regard, we can have alignment and misalignment, whether it's, you've touched on a lot of them, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, community, financial, all of these things. So what areas of your life and your health do you feel wealthy or abundant?
In the work I get to do every day, to be honest, like it's the more that I have the opportunity to work with women in this capacity and teach, like it is of servitude, but it also comes right back. Every woman I work with is another opportunity for me to see this mirror of either how I want to emulate and live my life or where I need to actually slow down and pay attention. And in my family, I've been with my husband since we were 16 and 19, since high school. I have a very rich relationship with him and our kids. And, we've just, I don't know if it's us being entrepreneurs and doing this together, but our motto in life is that everything is figure outable. And so, just approaching things through this lens of fun and joy and adventure, but also simplicity and ease. It's always the question we all ask, like, what if it could be easy? And so, yeah, for me in my life, that's where I would say I feel like I have the most wealth. Yeah.
You might have already answered this question, but, each of us as individuals are kind of like hoeing our own row or climbing our own mountains, whatever analogy you want to use, and working on things. And some of us more intentionally than others. What is, a mantra or meditation that you are focusing on or is grounding you right now where you are?
Yeah, I would say it's energy flows where attention goes, right? So it's like if we're focusing on something that's negative or we don't want to happen, our energy is going into that. If we are focusing on something positive and then we do want to happen, our energy is going into that. So I'm always very aware of where is my awareness and my attention going in order to help to keep my energy. Right? It's really easy to like take on everyone else's stuff. And especially in the line of work I do, it's a lot of heavy stories we hear from people struggling. And so I have to clear my own energy, and my team as a whole, we have to a lot. It's you go to bed wearing these women's stories with you a lot of the time, and you just want to help everyone. And it's not always possible. And so, yeah, clearing that energetic field and that energetic space is a big one.
I'm going to ask you, I'm going to slide this one in because I'm so curious. You produce a lot of content for free.
Yeah.
And if anyone is curious about the topics that we're talking about today, I would highly recommend following Jenn on Instagram and YouTube. You have incredible content that you've produced for free. Where do you get the time for that?
You know what? I am like a ninja of batching. So I was talking about this in my stories yesterday. It is an illusion that I'm constantly creating. I've been creating for a very long time, but for instance, when we create a podcast episode, it's what fuels our email marketing. It's what fuels the social content. It's what fuels the YouTube page. My whole motto in business is I will do something once, and we need to be able to produce 10 to 16 pieces of content from the one thing. So it's really like I get to be omnipresent. Where when someone's watching the reel, when they're listening to the episode, when they're diving into a free masterclass or offer that I've already done, I'm off doing something else in my life.
Right.
I'm not. So That's taken years of learning that in business, because in the beginning I did the opposite of that. And I was just, literally everywhere. And there are seasons of business that are like that. But, you get to a point when you do burn out where you realize, again, what if this could be easy? So it's been utilizing that. And, there is so much content we haven't even started to scratch the surface of releasing. Mm-hmm. So it's wild because I'm celebrating 27 years in business, yet I feel like I'm just getting started. So, for me, I always have to recalibrate, like, am I doing too much? Am I doing enough? Like, where's that sweet spot? And I have a really awesome team. I have a team who also makes it look like I am behind the microphone or the camera all the time. Mm. We did a day of filming the other day and we did 24 segments in a day, boom, 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 like that. That's 3 months of content.
Right.
So it's just learning how to like really concentrate the time you do show up and wear one hat for that period of time. And then the rest of the time is where you get to live life, pull back, or do other things.
I love that.
Yeah.
Carly, you can relate, right? Carly's mantra is work smarter, not harder.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's good. It's a great one.
Yeah.
Jenn, I am so grateful for your time and your generosity. I really appreciate the work that you are doing in the world and the advocacy and all of the free content and really shining a light on an area of women's health that has literally been in the shadow for so long. Mm-hmm. There are women that are close to me that are struggling with this decade-long transition that we've been talking about. And I think you are one of the people, we're so blessed to have you in this community that is really championing and advocating for all of us. So
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. It's been a good chat.
Yes.